Du har sikkert hørt at angrep er det beste forsvar. Velkommen til politisk ukorrekt kvarter. Valget i 2024, hvor Donald Trump hevder å ha vunnet, han er jo president nå, det er stjålet. Det var Kamala Harris som fikk flest stemmer. Men Elon Musk og Donald Trump, de klarte å stjele det valget. Det er nå kanskje en konspirasjonsteori, men det er en konspirasjonsteori som jeg absolutt tror på. Svært mange tror på. Og hvis du ser den videoen som kommer nå, så vil du også tro på det.
What happened is they rigged the election and I became president.
In this video, I'm going to make the case that Donald Trump had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to hack the 2024 election. The looming question is whether or not he pulled the trigger on the plan to flip votes in his favor.
And he knows those computers better than anybody, all those computers, those vote counting computers. And we ended up winning Pennsylvania like in a landslide, so it was pretty good. It was pretty good. So thank you to Elon.
I've spent the last 2 weeks interviewing election security experts and evaluating claims that admittedly look a lot like conspiracy theories. Indeed, they echo Trump's big lie that the Democrats rigged the 2020 election against him.
We did great in 2016. A lot of people don't know. We did much better in 2020. We won. We won. We did win. It was a rigged election. It was a rigged election.
While his allegations have been heavily litigated and lost in courts across America, there are important material differences between the 2020 and 2024 elections. Most notably are Trump's own recorded statements and actions over the last 5 years that indicate Trump's obvious intent to manipulate votes. You've probably heard this taped conversation during the interregnum where he talked with the governor of Georgia and asked him to find votes that would illegally flip the state to his favor in 2020 and deliver him the presidency.
Oh, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country.
By 2024, Trump was facing 34 felony convictions for falsifying business records and paying hush money to a prostitute. He would have been sentenced had he not won the presidency.
He's running for office again to avoid going to jail.
Given all of this, we have to ask, did Trump spend the 4 years after his loss planning to gain the presidency by any means necessary, including tipping the scales in his favor by hacking vote machines? Now, it's almost unimaginable to me that Democrats have been unwilling to ask this incredibly obvious question. Instead, they built their platform insisting that American elections were almost magically safe and secure despite all evidence to the contrary. Then, in the face of a historic and statistically questionable loss, Democrats failed to listen to security experts and call for recounts and forensic analysis that could certify once and for all what really happened. Instead, election officials across America aim to bolster everyday Americans' faith in the electoral system above all other considerations. It was even a main talking point at the only presidential debate where Trump continued to question election integrity himself.
Will you accept the results of the election, regardless of who wins? Yes or no, please.
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely. I would have much rather accepted these, but the fraud and everything else was ridiculous.
The Democrats fell for Trump's rhetorical bind because the actual fact was the electronic voting machines are nowhere near 100% secure. Disparate systems across different states had and continue to have known vulnerabilities that could have flipped the election against Harris. Yet, in her concession speech, Harris did not even acknowledge that it was possible.
You're feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election
But none of this stopped actual experts on election security from sounding alarm bells. On November 13th, 2024, a group of career statisticians, forensic analysts, professors, and computer scientists sent the Harris campaign a detailed letter that began with this line: "We write to alert you to serious election security breaches that have threatened the security and integrity of the 2024 elections, and to identify ways to ensure that the will of the voters is reflected and that voters should have confidence in the result." It was a several-page letter. In it, they cautioned that Harris should not concede without a detailed recount in close swing states where digital voting machines had been proven to be vulnerable to malicious attacks. They raise several specific issues that should have given anyone pause in pre-certifying the election and made an entirely reasonable case for routine audits in all close elections everywhere where the Democrat or the Republican was the victor. Now, I reached out to one of the authors of that letter in early July.
I'm Duncan Buell. My official title is Chair Emeritus NCR Chair in Computer Science and Engineering, University of South Carolina.
In our 45-minute conversation, which I will post separately on my back channel, Buell says that he has been collecting election data since 2010, and while he has never found explicit evidence of fraudulent votes by election rigging, he has located the sorts of election anomalies and discrepancies that undermine the public trust. He was also abundantly clear that a well-orchestrated hack wouldn't leave any traces behind.
If the attacks were done by the really smart people, say Russia, Iran, China, probably the hack would erase itself on the way out the door and we would never know it was there.
University of Michigan professor and election researcher Alex Halderman testified in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee in 2017, outlining exactly how bad the situation actually is.
I know America's voting machines are vulnerable because my colleagues and I have hacked them repeatedly as part of a decade of research studying the technology that operates elections and learning how to make it stronger. We've created attacks that can spread from machine to machine like a computer virus and silently change election outcomes. We've studied touchscreen and optical scan systems, and in every single case, we've found ways for attackers to sabotage machines and to steal votes. These capabilities are certainly within reach for America's enemies.
His testimony was focused on Russia, but the lessons pertain to any well-organized actor.
In close elections, an attacker can probe the most important swing states or swing counties, find areas with the weakest protection, and strike there. In a close election year, changing a few votes in key localities could be enough to tip national results. The key lesson from 2016 is that these threats are real.
And after his testimony, Halderman issued 2 reports to the committee, one open and to the public, and another that was redacted just for Senate officials.
I have read Alex's unredacted report. My take is that the unredacted report says exactly how you can compromise the system for every single one of them.
That Senate report was an exact blueprint for how someone could flip the election to their favor and leave only a minimal footprint behind. It wouldn't take a vast network of bad actors, just a committed coterie of individuals to put their fingers on the scale. Such a conspiracy would only require a few people getting access to voting machines and install malware and smart code to change the result of an election by a small enough margin that it wouldn't trigger a mandatory recount. It could be done with a thumb drive and a few minutes alone with an election computer. 3 separate security experts that I spoke to affirmed that the situation has not improved substantially since 2017. The dangers of digital elections are so well understood that they were indeed mainstays of the Republican Party's talking points for 4 straight years. Besides their baseless claims that Democrats were busing in immigrants to pose as legal voters and registering dead people en masse, well, here is Elon Musk while he was campaigning for Trump in Pennsylvania.
I'm a technologist. I know a lot about computers, and I'm like, the last thing I would do is trust a computer program. because it's just too easy to hack. It's too easy to add just one line. And it's really difficult to hack paper ballots.
The irony, of course, is that Pennsylvania is one of those states that relies heavily on electronic voting machines, and for which Trump stated on his victory tour that Elon's knowledge of, quote, vote counting computers helped ultimately secure his win. There is also evidence that Trump operatives obtained copies of voting machine software in Georgia starting just a few weeks after his loss in 2020. Here's CNN.
Latham can be seen here escorting a team of pro-Trump operatives into the Coffee County Elections Office, including an IT specialist who was working with Trump attorney Sidney Powell. This all happens on the same day the voting system in that office was illegally breached. January 7th, 2021, the day after the attack on the U.S. Capitol.
Meanwhile, an election official in Mesa County, Colorado, my home state, was arrested and sentenced to 9 years in jail for accessing voting machines unsecurely. These two well-documented breaches are incredibly important in showing the intent of Republican operatives to influence future elections. After all, once a threat actor owns a copy of the underlying software running on those machines, they have the ability to develop and test exploits on it that might allow them to eventually flip votes in their favor during an election. This could have been, in part, what Trump was alluding to when he spoke to a group of Christians at a rally in Florida.
In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
We will have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote. One thing that is important to understand about any plan to steal an election is that no one would accept a dictator's margin of 99% going to the leading candidate. To be credible, the campaign has to be within a plausible margin of victory. A hack only successfully transfers power to a candidate when the people accept the results, and it's especially true in close elections like 2024. And yet it needs to be said, even though there were a lot of digital ballots cast, most ballots cast in the last election were still on paper. And paper ballots, well, they can't be directly hacked because they're on paper. So what would an election hack actually look like in practice? I put the question to several security experts, but only Buell wanted to go on the record and on video for this report. So if you're going to swing an election 5% one way or 5% another, that data is going to have to be heavily manipulated. Would that definitely leave a fingerprint that people would find in the case of a sophisticated threat actor who closed the door on their way out?
I would think the answer is no, it would not leave something that you would find, because the right way to do this would be put a little random number generator that switches 1 in 20 votes at the place you're interested in. And, 1 in 20 depends on what you think the margin is going to be in that particular state. So you switch a small number. If people notice, the normal response is going to be to shut down that voting computer and not to assume it's been hacked. And, second time around, is the voter likely to have the same 5% change? Not likely. And the other problem, people have put in software that only makes the changes on election day. So if you're doing testing in advance of election day, this is like the Volkswagen test with the emissions controls. If it wasn't test day, it was normal. If it was test day, it faked the data.
Over the last few months, two organizations, the Election Truth Alliance and the Common Coalition, have posited several theories about what Trump's team might have done. The one gaining the most traction online right now is, well, it's sort of convoluted. The Common Coalition argues that voting machines were accessed on Election Day through Starlink satellites that communicated directly with the universal power converter devices that provided consistent power to the voting machines, and somehow they were able to hack the code through these UPCs, and it's sort of bananas. And as I noted in my video about Palantir, they see connections between one of the founders of the Federalist Society, Leonard Leo, and Elon Musk for this elaborate and implausible conspiracy. Now, I've gone over this specific attack vector in detail over the last few days, and I just don't buy it. The theory feels a little bit like connecting red strings on a corkboard as they dig through online evidence and press releases and news reports, and painting in between the lines to come up with the specifics of the attack. And all of the security researchers I spoke with said it was implausible as well. Not only was the attack vector elaborate, no one was able to show any hardware that met the specifications to actually allow someone to use UPCs to flip votes, let alone any leftover malicious code or leaked evidence. The most damning critique, however, of the plan is also the simplest. There are easier ways to hack election machines by simply using a thumb drive. So why go through all the trouble of the satellites and the UPCs? Occam's razor says, well, it didn't happen. Now, I tried to reach out to representatives of the Common Coalition to sort of get their fill-in on this, but, well, they never responded. Indeed, their website doesn't even disclose their identities other than that they have a GoFundMe campaign out of Texas. And this is all an enormous red flag, if you ask me. But Election Truth Alliance, well, they're a little bit more transparent.
My name is Lily McGregor. I am a co-founder and executive director with Election Truth Alliance.
The ETA sprang up in the wake of the 2024 election after Harris failed to call for recounts in key swing states after that letter by security researchers.
We know that Russia targeted 50 states in 2016. We know that they were in a position to do real harm in Illinois. And yet there is this really strong opposition to any kind of willingness to contemplate that there may be security considerations. And there is a sort of narrative of, well, no, we just have to go and win in 2026, and then we'll think about it later. My counterpoint to that would be, how on earth do you think that would be, if you think it is possible and you don't want to address it, how are you thinking about future elections in 2026, and why is this not of more concern to you?
And there are two pieces of evidence that the ETA cites that are worth delving into deeper. The first is a report that they worked on in conjunction with the University of Ann Arbor political scientist Walter Mebane, who analyzed voting data in Pennsylvania. Mebane developed a way to detect fraudulent votes in elections using statistics all the way back in 2007, which he has used to examine election integrity all across the world, from Mexico and Venezuela to Russia and the United States. According to his analysis of the Pennsylvania election, quote, the statewide total across precincts of the eForensics fraudulent votes model, and then he gives some numbers, 225,440 exceeds the statewide gap of 120,266 votes between Trump and Harris, which is to say that in the election data he was able to access, there is enough statistical signal to suggest that there were enough fraudulent votes to flip the election in Harris's favor. The paper has become a rallying point for people looking for proof in the election statistics themselves. But I have to admit that I have now read 3 of Mebane's papers, and the math, it's just too complex for me, a non-mathematician, to completely digest. Now, I reached out to him for clarification and to note to him that his paper has been the basis for people to call the 2024 election results into question. And, well, this is what he wrote back to me. Thanks for your interest. I'm not focused on claims about 2024, nor following the conversation in online media. My working paper about Pennsylvania in 2024, URL, that the ETA highlighted is now part of a book manuscript about the eForensics model that I'm currently racing to finish. I am not looking for media interactions at this time, so unfortunately, I must decline your interview request. To which I have to say, come on, Mebane, you can't just drop a bombshell like that and then walk away like nothing happened. And this is concerning because I sent the paper to other election researchers to interpret on his behalf, and none were fully able to digest it in the week that I gave them. All they could say is that Mebane is generally respected in the field and has been working on this long before the 2024 election, so it fits into the pattern of his work. So I'm going to have to put this as sort of an ambiguous, problematic piece of data that personally I can't evaluate. But there is another piece of statistical data that is easier to understand. A group called Smart Elections examined the difference between the presidential ticket and the senatorial and down-party tickets and found a glaring problem that they termed the drop-off rate. Now, the drop-off rate is the difference between votes at the presidential level of the ticket and the down-ballot races. In other words, it calculates how many people split their voting tickets, going blue or red at the top and then switching sides down below. Now, while dropping off does happen in every election, they found that in every single swing state, the drop-off was much higher than had ever been found before. To quote their analysis for just North Carolina, the Democratic drop-off in North Carolina is negative in every county because according to the official election results, in every county in North Carolina, Kamala Harris got fewer votes than the Democratic Attorney General candidate. Meanwhile, in those same counties that voted for Trump as president, also selected the Republican candidate for Attorney General. And this is an absurd result because it's not consistent with rationality. And it doesn't make any sense since almost everyone in this incredibly polarized America votes their whole ticket. Why would Democrats be the only ones to split their votes in this manner? And they also analyzed this same data point in just swing states and found the same incredibly troubling pattern. To quote their findings, this means that according to these results, 5% or more of Democratic-leaning voters chose to vote for the Democratic Senate candidate, but decided not to vote for the Democratic candidate for president, which means they were already voting. They just decided that Harris wasn't for her and they wanted Trump to win. Smart Elections has taken their case to court, demanding a recount in Rockland County, New York, where the drop-off rate was an astounding 23%. Their hope is to use this data as a beachhead to force recounts in elections across the country, which incidentally Kamala Harris could have forced, but chose not to.
Did manipulation occur? The only way that you can confirm that, it is a tough thing to be trying to reach for a smoking gun when what you need for that is to work with states and counties to go and examine the ballots and to do investigations. That is how you get proof. That is how you find evidence.
So where does this leave us? There is absolutely an incentive on the left to call the integrity of the 2024 election into question based on their personal biases alone. We can see the proliferation of complex and convoluted ideas of satellite updates and dark web conspiracies that resemble the thought process of QAnon after 2020. And that is concerning. However, while that segment of the left absolutely exists, there are also incredibly concerning hard facts that we cannot and should not ignore. We cannot know the mode of any specific hypothetical attack, especially when the threat actors can just erase the evidence behind them. But every election researcher that I spoke with said the state of current election security, especially in swing states, remains incredibly vulnerable. They variously told me that a single threat actor, a single person with root access to all of the code from an election services company like Dominion Voting could, in theory, rig an entire state election with no one knowing by just pushing an update to those computers. Meanwhile, a handful of people could rig a county with access to a voting machine and a thumb drive containing malware. Or, alternately, a group of 100 or more people with the same level of access might be able to rewrite code on individual machines and eventually take enough of the election over to their favor that the whole thing flips. But the more elaborate the conspiracy, the more likely it would be that someone would slip up and information of the attack would escape into the wild and eventually end up on a journalist's desk. Then again, maybe we're just not looking at it. Maybe during the election, there were anomalies that happened that election workers just saw as a restarting computer or a bug or a broken printer. It is totally possible that the evidence was there and just not recorded, which is the piece that we just frankly don't have. But we do know that there were statistical anomalies. The main evidence, at least as far as I'm concerned, about election interference comes from Trump's public statements and that the actions that he has taken since he won the election. On March 25th, 2025, Trump issued an executive order on election security that aimed to put election security under federal control, which is exactly what an authoritarian would need to do to fix all future elections in their favor. While the order was immediately challenged in court and hasn't yet gone into effect, Trump also cut election security funding to states. He has also been responsible for moving employees tasked with countering election misinformation. So it's not hard to see these actions as an attempt to gain control of the national voting infrastructure to best support his own agenda. In other words, Donald Trump had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to rig the election in his favor. He spent years stating over and over again that he believed that American elections are hopelessly rigged, and even actively attempted to manipulate votes from being certified in 2020. I can see no plausible reason why he wouldn't have tried every means possible at his disposal to cheat in 2024. His supporters were even involved in actually breaching those systems and getting the software that they would need to do it. The air is so thick with election fraud that maybe we are just ignoring the fire. It is completely possible that a hack would leave no trace behind. And I simply do not understand why Harris did not insist on taking every single possible measure to verify that the 2024 election was free and fair. There is no reason that Democrats should insist on the obvious lie that America's voting infrastructure is somehow supernaturally secure. In fact, maybe we need to take a lesson from Trump's team in 2020 and demand evidence of integrity. Here's Lily from the ETA.
There were 4 states that had hand recounts at the presidential level in 2020. That right off the bat, that's 4 more than we had in 2024. And all of the different pieces that got brought forward to lawsuits, all of that, great, that's good. It's good to make sure that you are doing that due diligence.
One thing that Trump, Elon, and I can agree on is that we need to get rid of voting machines and go back to paper ballots. That is the only way that we can be sure in the future that elections are free and fair. We need mandatory recounts in maybe every single election. It just is common sense.
We have to go back to paper ballots.
And Trump, he gets the paper ballot thing right. But there's something that I need to be clear about. I do not trust Trump. He is a proven liar over and over again. He installs grifters and charlatans and cheats into his administration. And looking at the statements that he has made about the election, it certainly sounds like he did something to tip the scales in his favor.
What happened is they rigged the election and I became president. And he knows those computers better than anybody, all those computers, those vote counting computers. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching this video on election integrity. If you liked it, you might also like this video I did on Palantir's connections to the Trump administration, where I touch on similar themes. It means the world to me that you are here. And if you support this kind of fiercely independent journalism, I would love you to sign up for my free weekly newsletter over at sgcarney.substack.com, where you'll get updates about whatever it is that I'm working on. And for my premium subscribers, people who give me a small monthly donation of about $8 a month, will get early access to videos like these before they go live to the general public. And there's also this awesome chat feature where you can talk to me directly. I'm only here because so many of you understand the value of my work, and I really couldn't do it without you. From Pokey Bear LLC in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates. Thank you so much for all of my supporters on Patreon and on Substack who make this work possible. The contributions you give keep this sort of independent journalism on the air, and I really just could not do it without you. If you want to get early access to my work and get your name on the honor roll right over there, please sign up at the links down below. From Pokey Bear LLC in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates.
Det er noe veldig galt med et land som ikke avviser statskupp. Husker dere hva som skjedde når de stormte kongressen. De ville drepe Mike Pence. Og så hevder de nå at de har stjålet valget. Det Donald Trump som har stjålet valget. Og la meg aldri glemme det. La meg aldri tilgi USA for det faenskap de har gjort mot Europa. La meg aldri kjøpe amerikanske varer igjen, for de gjorde ikke jobben sin. De impeachet han ikke. De stoppet ikke jævelskapet. De lot det gå. Til helvete med USA og Donald Trump. Den oransje slushe.
Nå tok et vedtak på å legge ned en næring.
If you don't have any art, you're pretty much lost.
Kan noen være så snill å slå av internett?
TV Ari Liveseid. Stem Venstre. Bli medlem av Venstre. Kjemp for Venstre. Norges fremtid er avhengig av et sterkt Venstre. Så bli medlem av Venstre, og stem Venstre.